Matt Toomua, wondering, did you happen to see on the weekend Mick the Kick Burn post-match after the Fijian Drua scored a pretty dramatic victory over the Waratahs?
Yeah, I did, and there were so many things I liked about it. One, obviously, it was timely because we spoke to Mick earlier in the week, but it was just how he didn't say anything. He just wore the hat and continued, and it actually took some investigative journalism kind of to dig a little deeper to find out. And I think they're the best jokes, aren't they? That was I thought that was class by him.
So, for all those that don't know, Mick the Kid Burn, 2 years ago, he starts as the head coach of the Drua. In their first ever game, they lose to the Waratahs, who themselves were coming off a winless season in 2021. So, what does Darren Coleman unfortunately say? He says, "Look, we haven't beaten anyone. It's not like we beat the Chicago Bulls." So 2 years later, Mick the Kid Burn rocks up to his post-match press conference wearing a Chicago Bulls hat. And look, it's a great case of trolling. Uh, Perhaps it's rubbing some salt into a really wounded Waratahs at the moment. Tell me, have you seen many cases of trolling in your long career as a rugby player?
Yeah, it's probably not as prevalent as it should be. I remember a few years ago, during Super Rugby AU, I came out and said that Michael Hooper hasn't got a turnover since the 90s or something. Obviously, Hoop's been a good mate of mine. Anyways, he come out that game, he gets a turnover, and I think it was Joey Walton comes and pushes me in the face and goes, "Yeah, how about that for a turnover?" Blah blah blah. And I was like, "Mate, it's a joke." But no, I think there's plenty of people either trolling the haka who have had pie in their face in the past. That's for sure.
It's a fine line that you tread, and if you come out and the victor and you win, then it can be a great moment. But I feel like Darren Coleman will be, not that he'll be regretting his words, but he'll be thinking that they've been taken slightly out of context in that one.
Yeah, one of my favorite actually was, do you remember, it might have been 2018, Owen Farrell has done a shoulder charge on Andre Esterhuizen, England versus South Africa. Should have been a penalty.
Yeah.
Clear, yes, Twickenham, clear, no arms, and then no arms, and then during the week there's a clip goes viral of Rassie Erasmus and Jacques Ninaba teaching Andre how to tackle with no arms, and it was good crack. It was I think he said in the presser afterwards, if this is legal now, we must change the way we change the way we coach, and he's come out with a clip later on, and I think it's good. It's good. I know rugby's a gentleman's game and all that, but it's good crack.
I'll tell you what, it's great that you brought that up because Rassie Erasmus is one of the all-time great trollers, and I think long may it continue. Look, we're not here just to talk about trolling. There's heaps coming up and to talk about Super Rugby upsets, the Queensland Reds falling at the hands of the Western Force. We'll be joined by the Brumbies back rower, a guy that has a great knack of sensing when to go for the ball, Luke Reimer. And look, we'll look ahead. The big one this weekend, the Brumbies and the Reds up at Suncorp. So a lot happening here on the Roar Rugby podcast. So, Matt, it's a slightly different backdrop for you this week. I appreciate the fact that you're going for the intellectual look with the bookcase behind you, but you're back in Australia. What's doing?
Yep, got rid of the sports cap, and I've gone with the books now. Back, we've got a week off in the Japan Top League, so I've come home for the week. We had our first baby late last year actually, so we're just giving the family a bit of time to spend time with her, and it's good back in the nation's capital.
I'm sure you would have slummed it back in cattle class coming back from Japan, right?
We did, mate. We did. Although, how about on the way? So we come back, and then we obviously got a bassinet for baby. But on the way to Australia, we didn't get the bassinet. So I said to my wife, "Oh, don't worry, I'll get the bassinet." I asked the lady if we can swap seats because we've got a child and bassinet, and she flat out refused. So she refused my baby being able to sleep in a bassinet because she wanted like the front seat. Anyway, I was in cattle class. It's been a steep fall from grace now. When Super Rugby and Wallabies used to pay for business class, now that I'm paying, it's very much in cattle class.
Yeah, that's a man that knows how to do their finances. Melbourne Rebels, take note. Hey,
Well done. Well done. That's good.
what's your elbow like though? Because I imagine there's a fair bit of nursing of the baby then, right?
There is. She doesn't like the normal cradle though. She likes over the shoulder, which she's ruined about 15 of my shirts because she just dribbles all over it. But no, getting used to it, mate. It's good. It's interesting time of your life. Exciting, actually. You know, one of the coolest parts, as you very well know.
Yeah, indeed. So Super Rugby, it was a big weekend. It started off on Friday evening, and it's probably a night to forget for the Melbourne Rebels. But the Brumbies were certainly very impressive. Look, I want to go first of all to the Rebels. Look, how must Kevin Foote and the Rebels group feel, because the Filippo Danguna news I revealed earlier in the week that there was an issue with a relocation fee that hadn't been paid, and that was the reason why he skipped the match against the Queensland Reds a week earlier, where they really struggled, and his absence was telling. He wasn't there again once again against the Hurricanes, and they get blown away in the first half. Is this a case of a group that's starting to unravel a little bit with all the off-field stuff that's been going on, or am I reading too much into it, do you think?
Oh, it's certainly snowballing though, isn't it? I'm interested to actually get your thoughts on the Filippo on Filippo's things. What do you think? How do you think people react to that? Like the average supporter of the Rebels, or you know, Australian rugby supporter. How do you look at that as like an entitled rugby player, or do you look at that as someone who's very much well within his rights?
Look, my understanding from a journo is that, and a lot of the Fijians, they do send money back. They pay for, maybe not just their families, but villages at times back in Fiji to ensure that they have a better life. So I don't think it's as simplistic as a lot of people might think. But yeah, look, the great thing about the Roar is that it's a massive community and discussion where you get feedback from what people are wanting. There's hundreds of comments on certain stories, and at times it nudges 1,000 comments. And I think there was an element of sympathy going, hang on, like, he's entitled to his pay the bloke, but there's also an element of, what are you doing around your team? And like, are you letting down your team here at a time when, and perhaps even the Rebels, when you're a Wallaby, you're a big name recruit, you're still being paid presumably, I'd imagine it's at least a couple of $100K. It's a pretty good wicket compared to the average Joe. That's who knows? It might be getting 50, 60. Who cares what number it is? Is there a bit of entitlement about it? Perhaps, but you can understand, can't you?
Oh, definitely. And I think, like, I personally look at it and I feel the same way, a little bit torn. Like, if I'm in Filippo's, if I'm a teammate of his, I'm going, come on, mate, let's go. You know, we've got a season here, and you can only imagine that with all the off-field stuff during the off-season, they would have had some player meetings. We spoke with Lucan about addressing it, about really buying into the culture, and then something like this happens, a little crack or whatever, and once again, I don't blame the guy. Like, as you said, he's got obligations. He's got other things and people to take care of. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I do enjoy the discussion around it. I think, it is unfortunately starting to snowball, and the concerning thing with the Rebels is their on-field performances haven't been improving, and I think you saw on. Kevin Foote made quite a few changes on the weekend to hopefully get a desired kind of response, and I don't think we saw that over in Wellington.
No, we didn't. And you saw it was 4 tries in about 10 or 11 minutes there, and the Hurricanes just opened up with the Rebels, and they just have an inability to slow the ball down at the moment. We were messaging throughout the game a little bit, but no Richard Hardwick now, who's, of course, he represented Namibia last year, but his absence has been hugely telling. He was playing in the back row alongside Brad Wilkin, another guy who can get on the ball. But Filippo Danguna, that's one of his strengths in the wider channels, is to be able to clamp down, get on the ball, and between not having a particularly fast defensive line and also not being able to slow down the ruck speed. We saw it against the Reds. The Rebels were just getting carved up, and it really didn't change until early in the second half for the second straight week.
Yeah, look, I think the Rebels have very much got the cart before the horse at the moment. They, are traditionally a line speed team, but you can only do that if you've got pressure on the ball. And as you say, Hardwick, Wilkin, Kemney, Daugunu,
Yes.
These guys are all on-ball specialists who slow that pill up and allow you to get some line speed. And at the moment, the Rebels are kind of lost. Their back row balance is very like South African-y, old traditional South African. We're all ball carriers. But unfortunately, they're not playing a game that kind of suits that at the moment. So I think they're struggling a little bit for that identity. I don't think you're seeing that traditionally strong, aggressive defensive line that the Rebels are known for. And I think that's because of the contact area.
So I know that I've touched upon it in the 5 things we kind of learned story. Paul Cully touched upon it in his type 5 that he does to the Sydney Morning Herald. It's so open at the moment, Wallaby selection. And if you look at the number 10 position in particular, that is even more open. And I don't know if you could say definitively who's going to be starting in the number 10 jersey, but playing behind and around this as a youngster, as Carter Gordon, off the back of a pretty tough 2023, where it started probably on a high and it finished on a low at the World Cup. How difficult must it be for Carter Gordon, who is shouldering a lot of the burden, but also he's the goal kicker of the side?
Yeah, it's huge. You look at there was a decision made, I think it might have been in the first half. Carter does a little quick line drop out to Kellaway. And then, a phase later, they turn it over and, the Hurricanes are in the 22. Like, just little decisions like that for me are a team that's under pressure, a team that's just searching for answers, that probably lacks a little bit of direction, and it's probably a little bit of, angst, because I'm as you've just painted the picture, but Carter, no one would be more aware of the situation than Carter. And, he would be wanting to make a good impression. And there is that tendency to want to maybe overdo things. These guys are competitive people at heart. And so they're fight or flight. They're going to fight, 9 times out of 10. And so, yeah, I do worry about that. I think, unfortunately, though, there's not too many teams in Australia where the 10, there's 2 teams at the moment that have probably got a winning record. So those 10s are probably, playing off the back of a strong forward pack. So he's not alone there.
It was good to see his brother Mason Carter on debut scores a well-taken try. That's a nice way to start your career. Hey, Taniela Tupou, he's been linked to Leinster. It's a huge club, one of the biggest clubs in Europe. They've won European Championship Cups recently. You probably played against them when you were playing for Leicester, and they would have been a juggernaut back then. They would be a juggernaut if they were to land Taniela Tupou. My understanding is that they've very much spoken to him, and it would be one of their most expensive deals ever if they're able to land him. What do you think? What's your initial thought around Taniela Tupou leaving Australian rugby, and secondly to a club like Leinster?
Yeah, look, well, how old's Taniela? About 27?
27. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's in it, like he's starting to get the golden years for a prop. Like, props are kind of late 20s, early 30s. You start, they kind of hit their peak, and so I don't know. There is part of me that goes, look, he come over from Auckland, quite young, was at the Reds for 8 or so years, comes down to the Rebels, wants to get a new sense of things, and then all this happens in the off season. Yeah, fair enough if he's wanting to go, not to sunny Dublin, but fair enough if he's wanting to go to Europe and play a little bit of rugby there and earn some money. And from an Australian rugby point of view, I think this would probably go back to what we spoke about a few weeks ago in terms of eligibility. Like, yes, we lose him from a marketing side on Super Rugby, but do we gain more by keeping $1 million that we can invest into community rugby or other guys, and then we can use him for the marketing for Wallabies anyway. So I do wonder if there's benefits in that. Of course it's going to be a loss, but I also think he'll be such a better player in a few years' time. Having to, play in a system like Leinster, who probably challenged Crusaders or Canterbury in terms of consistency over time. I think you'd only benefit from it.
Yeah, and from my understanding, he's very much considering it. And if you asked him perhaps today, he might say, yeah. And you can say, you're right. The Queensland Reds, the end of his last year there wasn't great. They definitely signed right at the start of the season, and then he missed the rest of the super season. And then last year, also has the World Cup where he only plays the opening game, and it was injury riddled. So there's been quite a few challenges for Taniela, and perhaps he does, and he's considering a fresh start, a clean slate. Do you think, would you be supportive of Taniela going, you know what, spread your wings? You might be another case of Will Skelton, who goes overseas and perhaps even gets better, and then still get picked for the Wallabies, and not just sparingly, but often given the loosening of the Giddo law over the years.
Yeah, I probably would. I think Taniela is an amazing player. There's no doubt. He is so well respected around the world in terms of his rugby. But his consistency for me will come when he's happy. He's such a jovial guy. He's such an emotional guy, and he's a leader in that sense too. He's influential. He's funny, and you want him happy. And I don't know. I feel like it's almost a case of not flogging a dead horse, but a situation that's not working here, where he's trying something here. It might be a case of go overseas, get a fresh kind of view on things, get new eyes on him in terms of coaching, play a new system, a new competition, learn a new way, and it could really benefit him. And as I say, we look at guys like Will Skelton, who it has benefited. We spoke to Luke a few weeks ago. I know personally from my experience, I benefited a lot from going overseas. So, yeah, sure, we might lose him, and there's a bit of short-term pain, but he's 27. You'd like to think we've got a good 5 years out of him at least left.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I would say off the back of that is the Lions is next year, and if you're taking on the British and Irish Lions and you want to be really competitive against them, you've got to have not just one outstanding tight head prop. You need to have 2 to 3, because the Lions series is taxing, it's brutal, it's obviously 3 test matches, but it's a the Rebels, if they're still around, would be playing. There's Australia A. It's a showpiece event where the Wallabies and Rugby Australia need to get 100 mil. They're banking on that for the sustainability of rugby in Australia.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, I agree with that. But from a purely playing point of view, what better way to prepare yourself to playing against the British Irish Lions than playing in URC, playing in the Heineken in Europe, so are there benefits from that side of it? If you have your starting prop who's been playing alongside these guys benefiting, he only needs a minimal kind of time back in the Wallabies program to kind of get going. But yeah, I don't know. I 100% see your point. I'm probably just playing devil's advocate as well. But I probably see it more from a personal level, where you probably see Taniela at the moment. He looks emotionally, things are quite heavy, and I think he could really benefit from kind of a new perspective on things.
All right, we're going to get joined by Luke Reimer in a moment, but just initially, your thoughts. The Brumbies, Moana Pasifika, they put away them very easily, comfortably, 60 points to 21. I think it was 9 tries to 3. Was this the best Brumbies performance of the year, or is there's an asterisk there because it's against Moana Pasifika?
No, not at all. It definitely was. Look, Moana beat the Force the week before over in Perth. And I think what we saw was the Brumbies really respecting them and understanding that. However, at the same time, started to find their identity a bit. That's probably something that I mentioned a few weeks ago, is that where is this Brumbies team? And we saw a couple more tries again. We saw some, some advent, some play from in their own half. I thought it was good. I really, really enjoyed Noah and Lolesio, and Tom Wright, the way they attacked the game, and I just really hope they can transfer that to these bigger games now, because the way they played against Moana, they were so aggressive at the line. It was exciting. The challenge now is to do it in more often and against some of the stronger teams.
Was there a moment about Noah's game in particular? To me, it looked like he was running the ball a fair bit more. He wasn't second guessing himself at the line, and he even managed to free his arms as well.
Yeah, you're spot on. Whenever he takes on the line, that's when he's at his best by far. When he's a bit quieter, it's when he's playing deep. He's second guessing. He's falling off tackles. For me, he's a guy who needs to find his physical presence in the game through attack. So he needs to carry the ball, get hit, and I find it translates into his defense as well. When he plays deep in attack, he often misses tackles as well, and it kind of all cascades a little bit. So that was super impressive for me, was the fact that he was taken on the line, being aggressive, looking at the close holes. Good signs.
All right, so we're going to get to Luke Reimer. He came off the bench, but more importantly, he played a really great part in the Brumbies back row, which was completely dominant and played extremely well. Hey, it's a very warm welcome to Luke Reimer. He's basically one of the best pilfers in the game. But Luke, it's really good to have you join. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, boys.
Tell us, mate, it's been a bit of a changing of the guard the last couple of years. You would have made your debut in 2021. Dan McKellar was still running the roost there and ruling the roost, rather. And now it's Stephen Larkham and there's no Laurie Fisher. What's life like down in the Brumbies since those big guys have kind of left, the big personalities have left?
There's a lot less yelling, that's for sure, with both from Dan and Laurie. But the culture that those guys have built at the club has really carried on with Steve coming on board the past couple of years.
Yeah, and obviously you've got some ex-Brumby players in the coaching staff. I'm sure that helps a lot as well.
Yeah, big time with Benny Moen running the forwards and defence. He's a player that I watched growing up. And he's a massive help technically, and he's real good for kind of knowing what the players go through, which has been a massive help, and how we can put our best foot forward. And having Johnny Luge there as well, he's always good value. He made a little cameo last year against the Tars, which his body didn't agree with, but it's good having him there as well, and he's steering the scrum ship pretty well.
Does Benny Moen still have a awful read on the social pulse of the team? He wasn't emotionally probably the most intelligent, but a very, very good by the book from memory.
Yeah, he's been real good. The boys are buying in. He thinks he's probably funnier than he is. A few jokes here and there that could be better.
He's a lot funnier when he picks the team, isn't he? He's a lot funnier when he picks the team.
No, I'm pretty sure Steve steers that ship too.
Hey, Luke, we'll get to the 60-21 really comprehensive win against Moana Pasifika in a second. But it's the Brumbies have, off the back of that impressive start against the Rebels, there was a couple of kind of speed bumps along the way, and you felt it first up against the Chiefs, but you've bounced back since to get be undefeated in the last few games. When you have such a changing of the guard with different probably principles in play, and you're trying to adapt and develop your game, what's it like when you've got new coaches and new ideas, and then trying to implement that onto the field?
Yeah, there's a big difference between for example, our defense this year. We're looking to get more line speed, put more pressure on. Whereas previous years we've focused on connection first. So getting that adjustment and then dealing with the issues that come with that and getting some good solutions to fix that's been a challenge. Probably the points we've conceded has been higher than we want, and that's just an ongoing challenge that we'll look to fix with tackle completion, being able to have connection with line speed. Yeah, pretty much that.
Yeah, it's a different game. Different game these days. Like you can concede 30, but if you can score 40, it's kind of irrelevant. I think that's one way that Super Rugby's gone. Lucky, one thing I'm interested actually is you've got quite a strong league background, and usually when you see guys with that background, it's their ball carry and kind of those obvious things. The one thing that you've really shone at is your pressure on the ball. Probably not something that's typically associated with leagues. Just did you always have that? Did Laurie Fisher coach it into you? Where'd that come from?
I've got a fun fact. I've actually never played a game of league.
You haven't?
I haven't. I was brought up.
Geez, you've managed it well then.
I was brought up in Union, played Union my whole life since I was 3 in my brother's team, and I'll stick to Union. Never really gave the league a crack. It was just out of school that I got the opportunity, which I turned down to come here. But yeah, I don't know who's feeding that league chat.
Well,
but...
Is it obvious? Is it obvious that I'm new at this interviewing game?
Mate, those sources need a little check.
Oh, I was looking at your Instagram. West Tigers, left, right, and centre, fishing, everything. Jeez, I doing my homework.
I do enjoy watching league, and I love getting out to Leichhardt Oval. But yeah, I've never actually played a game.
Well, they had a good win on the week. Yeah. Well, it's a shame that the Waratahs aren't playing at Leichhardt Oval anymore, but it's good to put that myth to bed. But Matt's right. You're killing it on the ball. Laurie Fisher, I imagine, would have been really influential in helping you grow that area of your game. Is there something about his coaching that stood out, that resonated with you about being able to implement that? Because you had the role of being a real super sub over the last couple of years before kind of now developing and growing to that number 7 jersey since Pete Samu's left.
Yeah, I reckon everyone who has Laurie as a coach will know that he's a technical coach and he's one of the best in the world. So he'll be an absolute asset to the Wallabies moving forward. But yeah, he's just his technical coaching around footwork and foot patterning to get into those positions. I found probably the most helpful because when you get in there and you're in a solid position, that you don't need too much other than a little bit of effort and close the eyes and let them hit you in the back of the head. But it's mainly that will probably help me the most. Getting into that position where I can be an asset on the ball, either getting the steal or slowing the breakdown down.
Yeah, okay. So what's it like, though, when you go from being a guy that's mainly come off the bench in your young career so far, and then the 7 jersey and starting? Are there differences in how you approach it and how hard you go on the ball early on in matches?
Yeah, I think it's just picking your moments and not... If you don't want to burn out, trying to hit every breakdown or running around like a headless chook around the park. That's probably something that will be my biggest challenge is picking my moments and not so much like pacing myself during the game, but not burning out too early so that I can be effective for my roles around the field.
Speaking of challenges, like you've got the Reds up in Suncorp this weekend. Obviously, the Reds have been going pretty well, bar a little blip on the weekend. They've big part of their game has been their back row. How exciting is that? One, to go against them. Two, do you have a little bit of like, I know everyone likes to say, next game by game, or it's a process, blah, blah, blah. But, going up against someone like Fraser McBride or Harry Wilson, is there a little bit more edge to it?
Yeah, definitely. There's a little bit more motivation, to put my best foot forward and play my best game against who has been Australia's best 7, for the past year or two. That's definitely a challenge that I look forward to. Put myself, in the best stead I can, leading up with a full week of prep. And then guys like, Charlie Kay will be looking to impress against, a big ball carrying Harry Wilson. So, they both each have their qualities and strengths, but, there's definitely like a little bit of extra competitiveness this week, especially with the new Wallabies coach coming in, that everyone wants to, impress. So, it will definitely be a factor in this weekend, but, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, speaking of that, like you don't often hear players, and particularly 7s. So I remember Michael Hooper for years and years would just say, you barely ever come across the other 7, like on the field, because you're just hunting different breakdowns. Like the idea of a new Wallabies coach, and I imagine yourself, you would have ambitions about that and whether or not that happens this year or next. How much does that kind of get spoken about in the playing groups, or do you just kind of know when players are tracking pretty well and it's a big week, this one?
Yeah, like boys will be putting their like best games forward, and you hear like a little bit of chat or that super round when they're all there, all the coaches there, and everyone was getting like a little. There were a few mentions about some players in certain positions that impressed. So there's that, but also we don't want to dive too much into that massive emotional side of the game. We mention it and then we control the controllable. So we'll focus on what we got to do and play to our game, more than really focus on what's going to be in front of us come Saturday.
Mm-hmm. A big part of winning up there is obviously silencing the crowd early. Have you guys spoken about kicking off to Harry Wilson?
We haven't yet. But usually when kicking comes into the conversation, I don't tend to worry about that so much. A little bit. I'll leave that to your Noahs and Ryan Lonergans, and
Tom Wright
that is not my forte.
Weekend too, bit naughty.
Yeah, I've heard about that a few times from him.
Has he been replaying it?
A little bit.
Yeah, what's it like at the moment, Luke? Because there seemed like there was a great buzz on the weekend when you've got Tom Wright doing those beautiful dinks over to Corey Toole and him lighting it up in Canberra. It seems like there was a great energy and you're all playing with a bit of that heads-up rugby that we love to kind of see as well. Yeah,
it definitely felt like we clicked on the weekend. Our combinations really went well. I thought we were all on the same page, whereas in a few games previous, we were a bit individual in the way that we weren't clicking and connecting well. But I thought the vibe was high after the game. Everyone was pretty stoked that we were able to string some pretty good tries together. A few from our half, and then some real quality set piece tries. But everyone was pretty happy. Corey with that crossfield kick, actually, he said that he asked Tom to kick it further so he could showcase his speed a little bit more. But he's a freak of nature. So I don't anywhere on that field, Tom could have kicked it. I reckon Corey could have beaten anyone to it.
It's right. I reckon
what's
he
it
kicked
like?
it off his shin, but Corey, what do they say? Good, it kicks only as good as its chase. And you got Corey Toole chasing, you'll be all right. So
I don't think he was
he
out
got
of
away with
third
murder
gear
there.
chasing that.
Matt, did you ever have any guys in the back line there that you've just kicked and you've known that whoever's chasing is going to get it?
Yeah, but I usually kicked it out on the full and we had to come back. So it didn't really. Henry Spate would be throwing his hands up in the air saying, "Just pass it, you lemon." But no, my feet weren't as delicate as Righty, unfortunately.
Hey, Luke, how did you end up actually in Canberra? Because you used to play for the Rats, and for those in the Shoot Shield competition, so you're obviously a Sydney boy. Was it Laurie or Dan that managed to pull you down?
After his league days.
Yeah, after your league days.
Yeah, after those glory days. No, I was actually out of school. I was contracted to RA as part of their retention contract. And when I got the offer from the Rabbitohs, we went back with that and the opportunity that Poe was actually finishing up at Brums meant there was an extra back row spot that came up. So they brought me down on a academy into full-time contract, and yeah, I just haven't really looked back. We took it we're back into 2019, and we did a year in the academy, and then was elevated into full squad.
So you kind of stitched up Matt a little bit by saying like there was a Rabbitohs link there. So is that your research that came into play there, Matt?
Yeah, mate, it's very, very in-depth research of few Instagram and Googles beforehand. But no, I think pie on my face for sure.
Right.
The Reds this week as well. Is it the biggest game for the Brumbies when you circle it? Because I know when Dan was there was a fair bit of tension that was brewing between the two teams.
Yeah, no, it's definitely elevated, like in emotion and intensity the past 5 years. Ever since really that Super Rugby AU season, and then going from that into the 21 final that we lost up at Suncorp. There's a lot of feeling, especially when Dan was here. He would pump it up. It was him versus Brad Thorne, and that's kind of carried on into Steve's reign as coach. There's definitely a lot of emotion when we get out there, but yeah, we try and, like I said previous, we try and not buy into it too much and focus on what we can control.
It's if Dan versus Brad Thorne's a heavyweight, I think Les Kiss versus Bernie would be featherweight. Fair to say.
Maybe even lighter. Bernie's looking pretty skinny at the moment.
What is it, Bantam or something?
Fly.
Yeah, moving to Canberra though. In all seriousness, moving to Canberra. One thing, even from my day and before me, one thing that united guys down here was that you often weren't from Canberra, so you didn't know many people down here, and so it kind of made the group even tighter. There wasn't traditionally as much to do as well in Canberra, other than get a coffee from 2 before 10. But other than that, there hasn't been too much else to do. How much does that play into culture? How much does that play into the tightness of the group? Because I probably didn't realize it until I actually left Canberra and realized it's not normal.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's quite a few boys from Sydney and Queensland, and a few from Melbourne, and obviously some from NZ. But that was one of the main things that when I decided to come down here, that I was lucky enough to know Righty beforehand. He went to school with my older brother, so it was good having him there. As kind of a link between me and getting introduced and acquainted with the rest of the squad. But and then with Billy Polo coming down after he finished up school, obviously going to school with him. and stuff. So it was good. Like he had the same kind of path where he had a few people that he knew there, and which really helped him because we're all in the same boat, living away from home. A lot of the boys that moved down here, and there's quite a few boys who are in a couple of share houses as well, which comes into play. Like, there's not many people I know who would spend so much time together and not get sick of each other. I feel like that's a big positive here is that we spend 40 plus hours a week with each other at training and outside, and the connections that we have and the mates that we made is something that I couldn't imagine having anywhere else, really.
Yeah, and that bond, I know that Fraser McWright today was talking about the fact that he's played and he's with Harry Wilson since junior footy now, and that bond on and off the field is so important. You see it with in spades at the Brumbies. So it's not surprising. Billy Pollard there, you just made mention of him. It's great to see him finding some continuity with his health, his body, being able to stay on the field because he's really impressing, particularly in the loose at the moment.
Yeah, he's been going well. His body's holding up good so far, touch wood. But those first few seasons, he had a few injuries. He had a foot issue, and then broke his hand last year. But he's been looking after himself. He had a great little off-season stint with Stade La Rochelle. He pronounces that way better because he thinks he's French. But into our Japan trip, and then into a good pre-season. So he's looking pretty good. He'll be pushing for Wallabies contention, that's for sure.
Now he does have a league background, or am I talking shit?
Yeah, he does.
You're
right. You're right.
50%. That's a pass at school.
Yeah, that's where I think you got mixed up.
No. Look alike. The two look alike hookers.
Don't insult me.
Hey, look, you're going to be going back to training tomorrow and saying don't go on that Roar Rugby podcast. They don't do their homework. But look, it's been great kind of getting to know you a little bit more. Hopefully the audience has enjoyed getting to know you too. All the best this weekend. It's going to be a cracker, and we're looking forward to that number 7 battle particularly.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been good. Besides the little myth getting busted.
I think it gets. We can edit it out, Christy?
Yeah. The amount of times we've spoken to. Hey, Luke, thanks. All the best, and good luck for the season.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Go well. Cheers, Lukey.
Cheers. Hey, Luke Reimer is a good player, and I think we'll see much more of him going forward. It's a big one this weekend. Brumbies going up to Brisbane. We know that in the past, Dan McKellar was always trying to turn this into a grudge match, and I think we've seen that over the last couple of years. The Reds themselves are coming off a surprise defeat to the Force.
Yeah, and what a good win it was. It was comprehensive, I think it'd be fair to say. The Force were brilliant. We saw the Force really attacking the breakdown. And probably saw a little, and with all due respect to the Force, probably saw the Reds seemed a little bit fatigued, maybe, those close wins or whatever. They seemed a little bit off.
Yeah, can teams get into a little bit of, I don't know if complacency is the right word, but for the second straight time this year, the Brumbies had a big win against the Rebels, fell off a week later against the Chiefs, and the Reds this week fell off after putting them away a week earlier. Was there anything about taking the foot off the gas that you saw? Because there was some, the line-out didn't function like it usually does. Harry Wilson was dropping kick restarts. It was just messy and untidy, and Les Kiss kind of summed it up early in the second half when Stan crossed it them, and he said, "Look, we've been a bit sloppy today," and I thought that hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, look, I think it's a bit of both in terms of the Reds, but you were always going to see an improved force, and they haven't been far off the mark other than that Moana game. And I think after the reaction that you saw from Simon Cron, they would have had a pretty difficult week training-wise. So, I think they were always going to be at their best, and then you couple that with, the Reds maybe being just a couple % off fatigue-wise or mentally, and then you see the score start to blow out a little bit like it did. So, yeah, look, it's a tough competition. It's the Force, whilst they have a disadvantage of having to travel so far to a lot of their games, they have an advantage of other teams having to come to them, and it's a difficult place to play. And if the Force turn up, it makes it even harder. So, no, I really liked what I saw from the Force. The way they played was great, and I think they're finally starting to get some points on the board, considering they've had some pretty good performances already.
Yeah, well, they out-enthused them, like their work around the breakdown. And there was probably 2 or 3 times that I noticed where the Force counteracted the Reds, and they probably shouldn't have lost ball, but that's just through effort, hard work. Carlo Tisano was there. He had his best game of the year. Nick White managed to get some ball to play off, and Ben Donaldson once again was taking the ball to the line. All pleasing signs for Cronny.
Yeah, look, I thought the Force in the first maybe 4 or 5 games were if you looked at their shape was brilliant, but it was all probably just a little bit too pretty in the sense that they would have looked great in a non-contact kind of game, and you can see that they've been working hard on that shape, but the kind of nuts and bolts of their game wasn't there, the contact area, the set piece, and these were the things that stood out on the weekend, and these were the things that kind of got them the win, and then the shape kind of dictates by how much that separation is. And so I thought that was really good to see, that they kind of coupled that really good attacking mindset with some kind of grunt work and some directness up front.
Yeah. And speaking of that, Coxon had his best performance. Tom Franklin rolled up his sleeves. I think Reed Princep, he had a really strong contribution off the bench coming on for the concussed Will Harris. Tell me, Hamish Stewart, he's a guy that has always flown a little bit under the radar. He's a good player. The question is he a test player? Because there is differences between someone who's really handy, as Nick White described him, the glue, which is perhaps a nice way of saying he's a good player. He keeps everyone together. Could you ever see him taking the step up to international level?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I think. Look, a few weeks ago we spoke about Australian rugby losing Scott Fardy, losing Lockie McCaffrey, Bill Meeks. We spoke about these guys that kind of that middle part of the system that we lose a lot, and these are the guys who, maintain standards in training, who bring up the young fellas, who have the culture, and I think Hamish is clearly one of them, and that's by no means saying he can't play test level. Of course he can, but what he's doing and the bits of his game that he's showing through effort and just through experience, and that's invaluable for a Pasitoa or a Donaldson. That's invaluable for those kind of guys, and I think we need to do what we can to keep them, because we have a lot of good footy players in Australia, but we've got to remember that these guys are important.
Yeah, it's the middle tier that you can't afford to lose, I don't think. Harry Potter, another one. He might not have finished or got across the line like he has in other weeks, but he, to me, is a guy that knows his way to the try line. I like the look at him. I think he played pretty well at fullback in his first showing there as well.
Yeah, look, when he was at when he went over to Leicester, I know he was spoken about very highly over there. Like, they really, really rated him. So I was quite excited when we got him back in Australian rugby, and you can see why. He's a good rugby player. He can play anywhere from probably 13 to the back 3 and do it comfortably. And I think once again another guy who is really good to have in your squad for a variety of reasons, but would clearly keep up the standards in training, culture, and all that kind of stuff.
So they're taking on the Drua this week. That's going to be a difficult one at Churchill Park, and it's quite the formidable record that Fiji is now have got playing at home. And they managed to keep it alive, their winning streak there, by getting past the New South Wales Waratahs. You got a feel for Darren Coleman at the moment, who's under all sorts of pressure to get a contract extension, but it's the third straight week that they've lost by less than 3 points. Did you watch the game live, or did you see it later? Because it was a cracker. It was pretty loose. It was quite open. The defence wasn't always great, but it was a really, with that crowd behind them, it was an enjoyable game to watch right the way through.
Oh, it was a ripper. It was an absolute ripper, and ended in the most Fijian way possible. A dummy to a drop goal, kind of off the wrong side. It was entertaining, but look, the Waratahs they're in a tough spot at the moment. You spoke about the close losses, but I kind of have a bee in my bonnet a little bit about this. We've been speaking a little bit about Darren Coleman and his future, and does he have a contract on the table, and this kind of uncertainty, and for me, I look at that game on the weekend, and if you're planning your season out, you've got some really tough games early on, two Kiwi teams back to back, then you go to Fiji, and then you've got a 6-day turnaround coming back here in a must win against Melbourne on Friday. Like, in terms of planning and seeing the bigger picture, do you really want your top 15 guys going into Fiji, playing 80 minutes or 90, whatever it was, completely drained, then a 6-day turnaround, flying back to win a game that you must like? But it is because Coleman's under pressure to get that contract. Is he constantly selecting his top 15 and not looking kind of further because he has that pressure, or is it a bit of an experience? I don't know, but I feel like the Waratahs are in a much worse position now, having lost that game, having exhausted a large chunk of the starting 15, and now they've got to come back on a 6-day turnaround against a Rebels team at home like that. For me, it's frustrating.
It's a really interesting point you bring up, because I've tweeted a couple of times. I've said it at a few different places. Teddy Wilson is not playing at the moment. Jake Gordon played 85 minutes on the weekend. He's pretty much played every minute throughout the entire five rounds to date. He's not the only one. There's guys playing big minutes there. Do you think that, I've never had to do this, how hard is it from an emotional and physical perspective to kind of get up from week to week to be playing all the time?
Look, to get up is fine. Like, you can do that, but to get up and be at your best every week, after 80 minutes or 85 minutes in Fiji in the heat, which clearly, the conditions were extremely taxing. You could see from the footage, but I look at that and I see poor leadership from New South Wales Rugby in terms of not giving a coach, having a coach kind of sing for his supper. And then he's a fighter. Darren Coleman's a fighter. He's trying to do his best. He's getting his players to do his best. But, would he have been better served having a few blokes rested, or coming off the bench, knowing that there's a 6-day turnaround, and knowing that there's a game against another Australian opposition which they have to win? If this start of their season looks that much worse if they lose this weekend to the Rebels, and I feel like that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and in the past, maybe the Drua, if you're playing them in Australia or New Zealand, perhaps you chalk it up. But I think they've only lost the one game last year, the Drua at home. That might have been against the Blues, but they beat the Crusaders. They had another big win over New Zealand opposition. Of course, they beat the Rebels. They beat the Reds. They smashed the Reds towards the end to seal their quarterfinal berth. It's not an easy place to go to get a win. No,
it's not. And look, we showed, they sent their best team, and that's like, it's of no disrespect to the opposition or even to the blue jersey. it's just an understanding from a planning point of view that you've got a long season ahead. You've got some games that you really must win if you want to make those finals. And Fiji in Fiji is a very tough game. Like that's an extremely hard game to win when you're at your best. Do you, pull, 3 or 4 guys to kind of sit at home and get ready for the next week, send some guys there, get some valuable minutes into them, and then really got the next game. I just personally, I feel like it's something we don't do that great in Australia. I think Super Rugby's always usually been such a short competition that we kind of just go all guns are blazing. But you're seeing teams now understand that depth is really important, and a guy like Stephen Larkham, for me he's a really good example of, in his early career he would have only ever picked the top 15 every single week. On the weekend against Moana, you saw guys, Harrison Goddard, you saw Kale, you saw Reimer come off the bench. You saw these guys get some minutes, and it is a little bit of chicken and egg. Do you give them minutes because they deserve it, or do you kind of give them, minutes so they can, grow? I don't know, but I don't feel the Waratahs have done that. I don't think their squad looks that. I think it looks a little bit skinny at the moment, and for me, I feel like it might have been a missed opportunity to kind of grow a bit of depth on the weekend.
Yeah. Just wrapping up that kind of chat on the Tars. You compare that Harrison Goddard left the Tars because he just wasn't getting enough game time. There was an opportunity with the Brumbies. He's a guy that's been starved of opportunities. He's gone around a few different places, but he's got a fair bit of experience, and he didn't look out of place at all with the Brumbies on the weekend. And then you bring on the quality of Orion Lonergan in the back half, and it just probably increases not only the quality of the squad, but the harmony of the squad, because people are playing. Now you look at the Tars, and I think there's a history of it. Bernard Foley, with Daryl Gibson wanting to get a win every week and trying to for his own future, and the demand that playing in New South Wales and coaching New South Wales entails, is that you need a win. And they didn't develop any other 10s other than Bernard Foley for 5-6 years. And in the end, he would miss the odd game for concussion, and Mac Mason comes in. He might not perform immediately, so he gets chewed up and spat out. And they're the things that you can't afford right now, because, look, even Tane Edmund, who probably needs a little 20 minutes off the back half of the game for his own kind of sanity a little bit after 3 gut-wrenching games where he might have and could have been the difference in at least 2 of them. So, they've got some big things happening ahead of them, and the Rebels this weekend, Friday night's a big one.
Yeah, it is. Look, sorry, and just to finish that up, for me, it starts from the top, and when you're putting week-to-week pressure on a coach to get a new contract, or to, as I said before, sing for his supper, he's not able to have this long-term kind of view. He's looking week to week, and you can't blame him for wanting Jake Gordon on in the crucial minutes of the game. You can't blame him. However, this, for me, it's a lack of leadership from up higher, in the sense that we're making someone so insecure about his position that he feels like he has to fight. And I just feel like we're chasing our tail a little bit. But that being said, huge game this weekend against the Rebels, and one I think they really have to win.
Indeed. All right, we better bring it up. The Crusaders, 0-5. Rob Penny, please. I feel for him, but look, there's all those sorts of discussions about whether or not Super Rugby is going to return to 11 or 10 sides. Are the Crusaders on the chopping block here, Matt?
Oh, if they're not, they should be. Rugby's got to stop looking at in the past and what's happened in the past. No, look, it's
the rugby league's now even gone to Christchurch itself, so they're taking over.
Oh, look, it's Crusaders were my favourite team when I was really young, and so I take no kind of I'm not enjoying it. It is interesting to see the power dynamic shift in New Zealand rugby and world rugby in a way. Fortunately for them, it gets a lot easier this week against the Chiefs.
Yeah, it could very much. It's the first time ever there's 0-5. They could very much be 0-6 at the end of it. Good luck. But you can understand there's all sorts of issues with injuries, guys that have left. They're missing experience. Their line-out's gone. You feel for the youth coming through. You'd love a Cody Taylor to come back. He would be there later in the year. But, it has made the Super Rugby competition far more interesting, I'll say that. Look, there's a couple other good derbies this weekend. We've touched on the Australian ones. We'll just make a quick note of what else is to come. And the Highlanders and the Hurricanes on Saturday night. That'll be a big one. The Hurricanes undefeated at the moment, so tune into that. Friday night, of course, the Crusaders and the Chiefs, as you've just mentioned. So that gets us underway. Plenty to whet your appetite. There's heaps of rugby being played right across the world. Dan McKellar's Leicester went down on the weekend to Gloucester in a real nail biter there.
Was.
Antoine Dupont playing in France with Stade Toulouse. All sorts of rugby going on, including in Japan, but that's about a wrap for the week. Matt, thanks for joining. We'll be back next week. Are you going to be in Australia or are you going to be in Japan next Monday?
No, back in the Northern Hemisphere. Just a quick trip so I'll be back on Saturday preparing for our next week. So, yeah, short little quick trip. But, yeah, it's nice to be back.
All right. Please rate and review, and thanks for listening to the Roar Rugby Podcast.